Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining Green Energy Consumers Alliance for this special webinar for National Drive Electric Week. My name is Mal Skoran. I'm a program associate for Green Energy Consumers Alliance, and I'm really excited to have you all here. As we wait for folks to continue to log in and join us, I'll just talk a little bit about Green Energy Consumers. We're a nonprofit organization, and our mission is to speed the transition to a low carbon future. And electric vehicles are a really big part of the work that we do on that front. Specifically, my job is to help run the Drive Green program, which, if you're not familiar with that, is a consumer-focused program to help educate folks on the benefits of switching to an electric car. And we also provide discounts as well at certain dealerships, excuse me, across Massachusetts and Rhode Island. So usually for National Drive Electric Week, we like to host big in-person events where we get folks behind the wheel of an electric car for the first time. We also have EV ambassadors who own electric cars and like to speak to the experience of owning one to help answer questions and help speed that transition so more individuals and more Rhode Islanders can drive electric. And we use that on the ground experience to help inform policy decisions and advocacy to make it easier for folks on a widespread basis to go electric. So I'm really happy to be having this conversation today. Electrification in Rhode Island is a topic that's near and dear to my heart, and especially considering the fact that about 40% of emissions from Rhode Island currently come from the transportation sector. And so electrifying vehicles is going to be a big part of the climate strategy moving forward. And so again, I'm really excited to have a panel of Rhode Island experts who are working really hard to make sure that Rhode Island can meet its goals for electrification, which currently is about getting 43,000 electric cars on the road by 2025, which we are behind on. But 5 years is still a lot of work ahead of us. So I'm really optimistic and excited to hear from our panelists today. Our conversation will focus on the unique challenges and opportunities for Rhode Island to meet its state goals. And excited to get started. So first, a couple of housekeeping things. Thank you to everyone that sent in questions upon registration. Those are really helpful. But there is a questions box included here. So if another question does come to you, then feel free to just send that in. And so let's get started. Everyone will have just a couple of minutes to share the work that they do and a little bit about themselves, and then we can dive into questions. So Carrie, why don't you go ahead and go first?
I'd be happy to. So first off, I want to thank Mal and Green Energy Consumers Alliance for putting together this event and for inviting us to talk. We're always thrilled to talk about all the clean energy initiatives that we've got going on in Rhode Island, because Rhode Island is a national leader in the clean energy field. So my name is Carrie Gill. I'm Administrator of Grid Modernization and Systems Integration for the Rhode Island Office of Energy Resources. The Office of Energy Resources, or OER for short, is our lead state energy policy agency, and we work on both policy and programs in order to deploy clean energy initiatives that get us to a clean, affordable, and reliable and equitable energy future. One of these initiatives is our clean transportation. Now, we partner closely with the other panelists on this call, including the Department of Environmental Management and National Grid, our utilities Pascoag and Block Island, as well as key stakeholders like Acadia Center. So as part of our work, we try to not only collaborate to put together smart policies and programs for clean energy, but we also deploy some of those programs from our office, including programs that incentivize electric vehicle charging infrastructure. Now, I'll talk a little bit more about other stuff we've got going on as we get into the discussion, but looking forward to the conversation.
Great, thanks, Carrie. Julia, why don't you go next? Great, thanks, Mal. Really glad to be here. Echoing Carrie's comments. You know, I think it's always nice to come to a panel like this with colleagues and stakeholders that we're working with. So my name is Julia Gold. I lead for policy and strategy and clean transportation at National Grid. So I work with a wide variety of stakeholders internally and externally within National Grid to plan our programs around clean transportation, thinking about the future not only of transportation and how to electrify it, but also to think about the future of a clean grid and how transportation plays a role in that future. We think my role is specifically to think about policies and strategies and programs that we can both implement in Rhode Island, but also across our jurisdiction. So working in the Northeast in both Massachusetts and New York as well, and thinking about the lessons that we learn from our customers across the Northeast and bringing them to, bringing our lessons from Rhode Island to New York and Massachusetts and vice versa. So really excited to be doing this work and here today to talk about, what we're thinking about, what challenges we have, and what opportunities are ahead of us. So thank you.
Great. Hank, you're up next.
Hi, thanks Mal and Green Energy Consumers for putting on this webinar and having us. My name is Hank Webster and I'm the Rhode Island State Director of Acadia Center. We're a regional nonprofit working throughout the Northeast to advance the clean energy future. And so transportation is obviously one of the largest areas in which we work. As was already noted, it's a large source of emissions. So I'm excited to talk about this topic today and really appreciate the work of all of our partners on this call. So thanks.
Great. And Allison, go ahead and round us out.
Great. Thank you, Mel, and thanks for having me this afternoon. I look forward to our discussions today. My name is Allison Archambault. I'm a supervising air quality specialist at the Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management. And unhealthy air affects all people and all communities. And as Mel mentioned, 36% of our state's greenhouse gas emissions, those heat trapping gases, come from our transportation sector. And they come from the burning of gasoline and diesel fuels. And if we can put people into electric cars and other non-carbon forming modes of transportation, we can really bring down those greenhouse gas emissions and also help with our local air quality at the same time. We certainly all know we have a big challenge ahead of us. We're all chipping away. We need everyone at the table to make this happen. But specifically our work at DEM to support transportation electrification, we work through a variety of methods. Our main responsibility is through our regulatory programs. And one example of this is our low emission vehicle regulation and the ZEV mandate, which requires auto manufacturers to have an increasingly stringent standard for both smog causing pollutants and the greenhouse gases for the passenger vehicles sold in our states and other Northeast Section 177 states. We're keeping our pulse on what's happening out in California to see what more regulatory programs that we could potentially adopt in the future. For example, California is currently undertaking the Advanced Clean Truck Regulation. Another initiative that we work through at DEM are various complementary policies and programs. For example, our grant programs, we have a Diesel Emission Reduction Act program, and also working with many of our partners at the table through investing our Volkswagen settlement funds. And I think it's a good time to highlight the work that's being done by RIPTA. So since 2016, they've been transitioning to a cleaner zero-emission bus fleet and planning for a larger scale green fleet initiative. So they currently have 3 buses on Rhode Island roads, and that's kind of been a pilot for them to see how the buses are supported here in Rhode Island. And then with additional grant funding, they were able to secure through the Federal Transit Administration, the Low No Emission Vehicle Program. They will be augmenting the VW settlement funds with that grant program to launch up to 17 new vehicles on the road. So it's a really exciting time. And then another initiative at DEM, we work with partners like Green Energy Consumers to do some more education and outreach. And one thing that our office is involved in is a campaign called Drive Change, Drive Electric. And this campaign is a unique public-private partnership with the auto manufacturers and other Northeast states to advance consumer awareness. And as we know with the light-duty sector, that's one of our biggest challenges. So we've been working with them to highlight some of the cities here in Rhode Island, like Providence and Newport, through a smaller campaign called Destination Electric, which highlights those communities that have charging infrastructure and businesses close by. And then as part of National Drive Electric Week, there's been some new video series that have launched with the comedian Tom Papa, and he's an EV owner here in the Northeast. And those videos are aimed at drivers who may be on the fence about making the switch to electric cars. So I think all in all at DEM, we kind of take a variety approach, but the majority of our work is focused around regulatory programs.
Awesome. Thank you, Allison. And thank you for mentioning both, climate warming emissions, but also particulate emissions that really affect our health. I'm looking forward to diving into that a little bit more later on because I know it's a topic of interest, especially considering COVID and the attention that's been put on all of our collective health. So thank you for that. The first question that I'd like to ask, directed to all four of you, is something that I hear a lot, and I heard it reflected in the registration comments as well, related to charging infrastructure. So charging stations require really different planning than gas stations typically have done, because it requires potentially upgrading electrical service for sites that want to install it, integrating them into the grid, and also, picking locations that will be best for the folks driving EVs. So how can we make sure that charging infrastructure is where Rhode Islanders need it, and what's being done to address that major issue?
I'm happy to go first if that works for the group. So we know that the price of EVs is coming down, which is wonderful, but one barrier that still exists that is preventing people from switching to EVs is range anxiety. So it's critical that we plan out our electric vehicle charging infrastructure in order to reduce the range anxiety and therefore reduce that market barrier to adoption. We recognize this, and from the Office of Energy Resources, what we're trying to do is to collaborate as much as possible when we are providing incentives for electric vehicle charging infrastructure. So, for example, we are just actually wrapping up a program called Electrify Ri. This was funded with money from the Volkswagen settlement funds, and we were able to deploy electric vehicle charging infrastructure to a number of different types of locations that are publicly accessible. So, for example, workplaces, public places, multi-unit dwellings, and others. And in doing so, our staff worked extremely closely with National Grid, who has their own electric vehicle charging infrastructure incentive program. By doing so, we were able to make sure that we were deploying incentives across the state. We were also able to make sure that we were leveraging both programs to their full effect to get the best possible outcome for folks who are installing the electric vehicle charging infrastructure. And we plan to continue to work on this. In our own Lead by Example initiatives, we are also working across state agencies to provide support where possible in helping transition fleets to electric vehicles. And so I know RIPSA was mentioned before. I've been on phone calls with them to try to provide some guidance. And the Department of Transportation, through our Lead by Example initiative, also has a goal to strive for fleet electrification. And so one of the challenges that we're thinking about is it possible to leverage the electric vehicle charging infrastructure so that both agencies and even other agencies across state government can have their fleets use that charging infrastructure. These are questions on our mind. I will be the first to admit we do not have the problem solved, but we definitely recognize the benefits to planned deployment of electric vehicle charging infrastructure.
Mal, I'll jump in if you're all okay with it. I have a couple of thoughts I wanted to share. This is Julia. So at National Grid, as Carrie mentioned, we have a number of different programs, and we're fortunate to be working with a lot of our state partners and large customers and stakeholders that are some of the early adopters to think through how to do this well. And one of the things I wanted to share is that, not only does this initial planning require a lot of consideration about our customers' needs, like Carrie mentioned, around DCFC and the visibility of fast charging and giving our customers the visibility so that they can feel comfortable making a transition to an electric vehicle, but at the same time also looking at the data and understanding the patterns of our various customers, whether it's residential customers or businesses in Rhode Island, what are their needs on a day-to-day, and thinking through then what does the system, how can the system best deliver to those audiences. Seems like you cut out, Julia.
I can.
Yeah, I mean, oh boy, sorry about that. Did I get? There we go. Okay. For a while. Thank you for your concerned faces. So I don't know exactly when I got cut off there, but what I was going to say is that a lot of it is about right sizing. So 75 to 80% of our residential customers actually charge at home. And so it's those other times when, you might need to juice up when you're out and about, or you're going on that, extended trip a couple times a year, making sure that you feel comfortable investing in an electric vehicle and understanding what opportunities are available both in Rhode Island and in our region to give you what you need. So it's to wrap up what I was saying is I think it's a combined effort of understanding the data and the needs of our customers and the residents and businesses across Rhode Island, and also some understanding what kind of technology is needed to give people to give people what they need to see to trust that this is a new technology that they can invest in. Great. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned businesses because we had a question come in from the audience about whether there had been an effort to contact the major employers in Rhode Island to install workplace charging and what the process for that was like. So would you like to address that as a follow-up question before Hank answers? Yeah, so I will say our workplace charging program is fully subscribed and we have a long wait list. So under our first EV charging infrastructure program that was funded through a filing in Rhode Island, so part of one of our rate cases, we have an EV charging infrastructure program that helps to support customers, whether it's multi-unit dwellings or office spaces, to install level 2 chargers on their properties for their tenants or employees. So that has been an extremely popular program, and there's a long list that is continuing to grow. And so an area in which we hope we can further support in the coming years to help employers make the investment to provide the infrastructure to their employees and customers. And Hank, I don't know if you had a comment. If you want to jump in there, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to really throw a kudos out on the electric vehicle charging station rollout that's been part of that investment and in coordination with National Grid and OER, the Electrify Rhode Island program. It's been really, I think, heartening to see the progression of each of those categories coming through. I think looking at the sort of the next generation of EV charging investments, it is important to recognize that there's a mix of opportunities, level 1, level 2, level 3, and there's some creative ways that we could deliver those. So, there are many places right now where level 1 charging could actually provide a great benefit to people, and that's the slower, form of charging, but if you're going to be somewhere for 8 to 10 hours, you might be able to recapture what you use to get to that location. So thinking airports for even longer stays, or transit hubs, park and rides. That's an opportunity for level 1 that has not been tapped into that much yet. Also, building codes, I think, should start incorporating requirements that each home be, if it's a standalone home or it's a multi-unit dwelling, that each be designed with this in mind. It's much easier to do all the wiring for a level 2 charging station at your home as it's being built, or if as a building's being built, than to go back and retrofit it. So that's I think an easy step that the state could take to make sure that this is a strategic path forward. And then for level 3, we're clearly going to need more DCFC charging. I think that's a big part of the regional agreements, especially with medium and heavy duty stations, vehicle mandates. And I think there's an opportunity to think creatively there. Like maybe especially for trucks, we start thinking about putting DCFC charging station at loading docks of big box stores that are already pretty well wired for high intensity, and those trucks are going to be there for a little while getting unloaded, and then that avoids the need to identify new places along highways for them to charge.
Yeah, thank you for addressing that. There was another question about, why don't we just put charging stations where the existing gas stations are? I think your response, Hank, kind of addresses that. If you're going to go for a strategic deployment, sometimes it seems like a logical thing to do, but there are other factors at play. So thanks for pointing that out. It seems like we lost Julia, but
hi Mal. I'm on the phone and I'm having internet connectivity issues, so I apologize.
Okay.
But I am still here.
It happens. I'm glad to hear that you're still with us. Great.
Sorry about that.
No worries at all. Matter of the times. So unless someone has anything else to add about the issue of charging, I'd love to move on to upfront costs, which is something, as Carrie noted, is declining because of improvements in battery technology and just better technology that's getting out there. But we found that upfront cost is still a major issue for a lot of folks, and that states that tend to have incentives upfront for purchase and lease costs have higher rates of adoption. So how much of it is it a priority for the state to establish a new EV incentive program after the short-lived program in 2017? Kara, if you want to take that on.
Sure. Yeah. So you're referring to our Drive program. It was an extremely popular program that offered incentives of a couple $1,000s for new EVs. Unfortunately, those funds did run out very quickly because the program was so popular, which is in and of itself a testament to the commitment of Rhode Islanders to transition to a clean electric transportation future, which is astounding. We have been trying to identify additional funding sources for EV incentives. We have not been successful at this point. We are considering additional pathways through 2 different efforts. The first is the Transportation and Climate Initiative, which considers one potential source of revenues to provide incentives for electric vehicles. The other is our carbon pricing study, which again has an investment scenario where some of the revenues would be diverted to incentives for electric vehicles. But those are just studies at this point. We do not have any plans to reinstitute an electric vehicle incentive program. That said, the cost of EVs are dropping, and there are occasionally some incentives that manufacturers will provide on their own. So I encourage everyone to do full research. If you're looking to buy an electric vehicle, you can go on the federal government's website. Actually, fueleconomy.gov is a great resource that can provide some information about possible incentives and also help provide some information to help you choose the right car for you. And then in addition to that, I want to highlight what California is doing. They just passed an executive order, I believe it was, that is requiring all new electric sales to be, or sorry, all new electric or vehicle sales to be electric vehicle by 2035. So this is a groundbreaking and nation-leading effort on California's part. California can do this because of the large market share that they have. And we do expect that this initiative will put downward pressure on prices and will help build out the market for electric vehicles. And so we might feel the effects of that as far over on the other side of the US. And last, I would just say that, you know, we're trying to do what we can with helping folks install electric vehicle charging infrastructure. So when you think of the holistic cost of owning an electric vehicle, we're trying to do what we can where we can at this time to help reduce some of those costs.
Great, thank you. And I will, as a plug, Green Energy Consumers also has a lot of that information on our website. And particularly for the Chevy Bolt, it was outrageous, the cost that you could buy one just this past month in September because of those manufacturer incentives that you had mentioned. So thanks for that. Hank, it looked like you wanted to respond.
Of course. Yeah, it's critically important that Rhode Island reinstitute its electric vehicle rebate or incentive program. And I think that the timing is right to learn from what our neighboring states have done in sort of the second evolution of their vehicle incentive programs. And it's taken more consideration of the cost of a vehicle. So you're not providing incentives to people that are wealthy and able to afford it without the incentive. It's thinking more about how to apply incentive opportunities for the used vehicle market. It's also thinking about, you know, electric vehicles that are not cars, but rather are e-bikes, which can help displace a number of car trips pretty easily, actually. They're really fun. So it's really important for the state to, I think, reinstitute that. We are an outlier in not having one in the region. And I take the point about needing to identify the funding for that. This is something that is so important and fundamental that it would be worthy of general fund expenditures. And Carrie alluded to the Transportation and Climate Initiative. That is a great opportunity that we certainly hope comes to bear. But we can do this more rapidly and then use TCI in the future to help take over the funding for that. And one idea would be to sort of apply the theoretical function of that and reward people for the carbon that they're not putting into the atmosphere by driving electric in the meantime. So TCI works in reverse to that, but that could be a useful way to think of it going forward.
Great, thank you. I'm glad that you brought up TCI. Oh, go ahead, Julia, please.
This is Allison. I was just going to touch upon the TCI. I think we have a huge opportunity ahead of us, and as a potential source of sustainable funds, there's opportunity, like Carrie and Hank said, is to provide incentives for not only vehicles but other forms of transportation, and thinking across the equity lines, also looking at potential used vehicles or ride shares or taxis to electrify those services as well, I think will be really important for our future.
This is Julia. Allison, thanks for bringing up the point about alternative, uses or alternative transportation choices like ride shares. The one thing I was going to say is I think it's important for us to also make sure, as Allison was saying, that incentives aren't viewed as just a way to provide wealthier individuals rebates for electric vehicles, but one of our neighboring states has recently implemented providing incentives also for commercial vehicles. And so thinking about, the neighborhoods and communities in Rhode Island that are most exposed to air pollution and where fleets are operating, and and where there's an opportunity to incentivize commercial vehicles, to whether it's, you know, rideshare vehicles available to TNC drivers or commercial fleets, and the benefits that those can bring to all with the air quality benefits that they provide.
Thank you, Julia. That's a great segue into my next question. You know, I think what you just brought up is really important because, you know, we want to reduce the total number of miles driven in the state, and we want to make those miles electric where possible. But the air quality issue regarding to that, Rhode Island recently participated in signing an MOU that commits the state to planning for electrifying medium and heavy duty vehicles, which, you know, while they're not responsible for a big part of climate warming emissions in the state, they do have a significant impact on air quality because they're usually diesel vehicles, which are, they emit more particulate emissions and other emissions that are bad for human health. So Allison, I know you were involved in that process. Would you like to comment on the unique challenges and opportunities when we're thinking about electrifying some of those bigger vehicles?
Sure. Before I jump into some of the challenges and opportunities, just to give a little bit of background, as Mel mentioned, the medium and heavy duty sector is both a global and has a very local footprint. And in Rhode Island, these vehicles, we have a lower number of these vehicles with lower VMT compared to our passenger cars, but account for the majority of some of our other localized pollutants like particulate matter. One exciting development that our office is working on is a transportation emissions dashboard. This came out of our work at the end of last year during our greenhouse gas emissions inventory. And even with Hank, I think, in the room, he even suggested doing something like this. But this dashboard will show transportation emissions from various sectors and subsectors in the state. So I think that's going to really play a key role on how we make some decisions and provide information to the public on where those emissions are coming from. But the medium and heavy duty ZEV MOU, the background on that, it's 15 states plus the District of Columbia. And it builds off the successes of the 2013 governor's light duty ZEV MOU and the action plans developed with that. The MOU commits the signatory states to work together to foster a self-sustaining market. It calls for 30% of new truck and bus sales to be ZEV by 2030 and 100% by 2050. And it also emphasizes the need to accelerate deployment of ZEVs in disadvantaged communities. And we, over the next few months, we will be working with the Northeast states and those who have signed on to the ZEV MOU to develop an action plan. And those challenges and opportunities, we have a lot of them, but they kind of fall into three major buckets, and I'd love to hear from those on the call about these. So one would be product availability, market demand, and driving demand from fleets. A second bucket would be reducing the vehicle and infrastructure costs, like providing incentives, financing via utilities, and other state rebates. And then number three would be reducing operating costs, the electricity costs, and predictability on the grid through this deployment.
I'll jump in. If
anyone want to jump in? Oh, thanks, Hank.
Yeah. So I mean, one thought that came across was operating costs, and that's a clear winner for EVs over their internal combustion counterparts, right? So if there are many on the line that are EV drivers, you already know this. If not, I hope you find out. But EVs are are less expensive to drive, both in fueling and in maintenance costs. There's fewer parts, there's fewer systems. There's no engine. There's no the transmission interface is different. There's no exhaust system. So if you think about all the things to repair on vehicles, there's a lot less of it on EVs. And then one helpful tool is the e-gallon, which you can look up on a federal website that shows you what the cost of the equivalent cost of driving on electricity versus driving on gas. And it's consistently lower than the price of gas, even in regions of the country where electricity is a little higher, like ours. It is a better financial deal to drive on electricity, and it's also a more efficient use of that energy. You don't lose a lot of it through combustion and thermodynamic losses. So I guess that would say that the first two buckets, I think, are higher priority here. Yeah.
This is Julia. I'll just quickly jump in and say, for National Grid, not only is this an internal challenge, as some of you may have seen, we recently and just announced, or will be announcing, along with utilities across the country, we are making commitments to electrify our internal fleets by 2030. The formal announcement with all the details will be coming out next week. But as we look to both electrify our internal fleet and working with our commercial customers and looking at especially the challenges with medium and heavy duty vehicles, I think I will agree with Hank, the first two challenges in terms of market availability and the upfront investment can be a significant challenge for many of the customers that we speak with about this. So.
Great. Yeah. Well, thank you for your insights. If no one else has anything to say about this topic, I'd love to field a question from the audience related to maintenance costs. So Hank mentioned that a big part of the overall cost to own these vehicles is lower maintenance. And while that's good for consumers, it's not necessarily good for car dealerships that rely on a big part of their income coming from regular maintenance. So can anyone speak to maybe that issue and how we might address that with the small number of car dealerships we do have in Rhode Island?
All right, I'll go again. So there are a few points. One, I think, is that this transition is going to be a lengthy one. So in terms of immediate impacts, I don't think that you would see a significant downturn in the amount of in the business line of vehicle repairs at those dealerships for internal combustion engine vehicles. The fleet turnover, nationally and locally is more than a decade. So there's going to be plenty of work left for those technicians. But the point is a good one, that we need to start training more and more technicians coming out of school to be prepared to work on these systems. And part of that is job training. Part of that is corporate leadership and making sure that their employees are ready for that. And part of it is a little bit of the manufacturers, ceding a little bit of control over right now. So in a lot of cases right now, if a electric vehicle gets into an auto accident, even if it's one where the equivalent accident in an internal combustion car would be repairable, a lot of times the insurance companies will actually total that vehicle because the parts are not necessarily as available, or the amount to repair is higher because it's a newer technology and there aren't as many certified auto techs, or a couple of other reasons. So that part of the equation needs to also get worked on so that it's a little more normalized. But overall, it's a great value for the consumer because you don't have as many ongoing maintenance needs. You're not repairing things as much just from normal operation of the vehicle. And I think that's a real win for consumers, and where all products should end up going instead of planned obsolescence.
I just wanted to really echo Hank's point about workforce development and training opportunities. I think that as we transition, I would be surprised if we saw a lot of internal combustion engines going away. It seems like there will still be a robust secondary market for those as we transition to electric vehicles. And so I think it'll be critical that auto mechanics and others, are able to repair both types of vehicles. And I think that was a great point, and I echo it.
Yeah. Well, just thinking about the point that we still have quite a bit of time until electric vehicles really take over. I want to direct a question towards Julia and National Grid, because a question I do get a lot from folks is that electric vehicles are going to overload the electric system, and it's going to be really costly to upgrade and think about supporting all those cars. So can you speak to that and what National Grid is doing to prepare for that future?
Sure. Yeah, it's a valid concern, and there's a lot of time to prepare and a lot of amazing technology that's being developed to help us come up with great solutions. So first thing I wanted to do was highlight a program that we have going on in Rhode Island right now, but then I'll talk a little bit about some of the other things that the other technologies and other examples that we're exploring. And I'm sorry about my internet. So I'm on the phone. All right, you've got me, and I'm just going to give up on the video. So in Rhode Island, we have a program, and I hope some of you listeners on the call today are participating. I'm sure some of you are. It's called our Smart Charge program. And what the program is it's an off-peak incentive program for our EV drivers. And it's ultimately a research program for us. It spans a little over 2 years. We currently have 354 participants in the program. And it is set up in a way to help both educate our Rhode Island customers in what off-peak charging is and how it can benefit the grid. And so if you charge your vehicle any other time, if you don't plug your vehicle in between 1 and 9 p.m., it's better for the grid when there's more demand. And so thinking about that flexible load, you're not going to unplug your refrigerator at different times of the day to help the grid, but there's a lot more flexibility in when you can charge your car. And so some of this is about helping our customers better understand how their charging behavior can help to benefit the grid and prepare the grid for when we have far more customers driving electric vehicles, far more renewable energy as part of the grid. And so thinking about really how to manage it in a smart and efficient way that allows us to accomplish the outcomes that we're looking to accomplish. In addition, we can look at how price signals, so our participants in our program are given incentives based on how much they charge off-peak hours. And so we can better understand how different price signals encourage our customers to adjust their behavior. One thing I will say is that we're testing different models of this across our 3 jurisdictions in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and New York. And there's a lot of new technologies coming out that can allow our customers to do this and participate in these types of programs more easily. And ultimately, I think as an EV driver and as a lot of our EV drivers or potential EV drivers, you don't want to have to think about your charging. You want it to be as simple as possible. So our number one priority is to provide a good customer experience. So we want our EV drivers and potential drivers to see that this is something that is easy to participate in, that you don't have to give a lot of thought to. And so we're exploring ways to do that effectively. In addition, I think on a grander scale, as we think about new technologies and ways to manage the grid, when we look at the integration of battery storage and charging, so being able to really manage where the energy is stored and how it is, how and when it is directed to vehicles is going to become more and more expansive in the types of choices we have. And so we are also doing, we have a program in Massachusetts that we're just starting to do a demonstration project and looking at how fast charging can be combined with solar and storage. And so we're really excited, I think, looking into the coming years, the many different opportunities that we're going to be able to provide to our customers to both better manage the grid, provide savings to our customers, and allow for us to accomplish our clean energy goals. So thank you.
Just from my experience as a consumer, yeah, thanks. Just as a consumer and an EV driver, I think it's been an interesting to be a participant in that program. It's definitely provided opportunities for me. I mean, I'm kind of a nerd in a way that I have the ISO New England app on my phone, and I'm sure many of you on this call also do. But it's definitely provided opportunities to speak to family members, share experiences, explain why we're doing what we're doing. And I think there's going to be, it's going to be exciting to see where this takes this kind of heads, and especially with more solar and battery storage coming online, it's going to be a unique situation for the grid.
Yeah, I'm especially excited about the solar plus storage plus EV charging. I think that's going to be crucial. It's kind of a fun riff off of, I've talked to a lot of people that are like, why not throw solar panels on top of an EV? It's kind of like a different interpretation of that I think is more forward thinking. So thanks for covering that. Great. So I would love to return back to this question of equity, because I happen to drive a pre-owned electric car. I know a lot of folks that are making the switch, but the question is, how do we make sure that all different income folks and the communities that have been most harmed by the air pollution in the state, how can we make sure that those folks really see the benefits of electrification moving forward?
It's a critically important question, and one that I think that every state and certainly the TCI states are trying to grapple with. And I think that there's a lot of good examples that we can learn from. California has some programs that developed really innovative opportunities within overburdened communities that didn't have a lot of access to mobility, inadequate access. And you can develop EV car share programs. There's a program where there are EVs operated by volunteers. Doesn't have to be a volunteer, it could be a paid employee, but that help drive people around to their errands. And so that's just one way to think of vehicle electrification and how programs can be designed. Certainly policy should support that, but it also helps address this question of, is particularly in Rhode Island, is it necessary to own a car? So this is getting a little bit away from vehicle electrification, and like, do you even need to own that vehicle if you can access the mobility services that you need to get to recreation, to get to essential services, to supermarkets, to employment, to education? And if we start thinking that way, and then we think of, okay, we've identified vehicles as a way to help people, whether those are transit vehicles, personal vehicles, bike share, how do we deliver that in a way that isn't adding fossil fuels or hopefully displacing fossil fuel combustion? And we're now at a point technologically where I think we're there. We're past the tipping point. As Carrie mentioned, internal combustion engines will be around, but with more and more states saying no more new sales starting at a certain date, we just need to start thinking more holistically about that.
Yeah, and to build on what Hank was saying, I think that this is really a critical question that we can address through two prongs. So the first is with direct investment in environmental justice communities. And I'll hand it to Julia to talk a little bit about how National Grid's programs are investing directly in environmental justice communities. The other prong is that we need to be thinking holistically, exactly what Hank said. So it's about mobility. It's not just about one particular technology or type of technology. In addition to that, it expands beyond clean transportation to energy efficiency and access to renewable energy and other clean energy sources. So I think that through thinking through using the framework of direct investment and holistic thinking and systems level interventions, I think that, we can certainly start to make sure that we are ensuring equity in this transition. Obviously we also need to think about a just transition for the workforce, as well as making sure that community groups are involved directly in deciding how these programs are designed and how the investment is flowing through to the community members themselves.
Yeah, thanks everyone. I guess I'll add one other point, or just to share a little bit about what I'm working on with my team and how we're thinking about clean transportation at National Grid and its connection to environmental justice. As we're moving forward to developing new programs, we started laying out a new vision for our clean transportation programs overall, in setting up key principles and guidelines for our programs as we develop them, specifically thinking about every program and the way that it may or may not benefit environmental justice communities, and engaging organizations in the process as we develop the programs, whether it's community advocacy groups, environmental organizations, but thinking about how we can better engage our customers and those that are most impacted by transportation pollution in the conversation, and thinking about, obviously the role that National Grid plays. We play a specific role. We can only do so. We can do what we can, but how can those programs that we're developing specifically benefit all of our customers, and how can we better highlight the benefits that are being provided to all of our customers? We don't want every customer of ours to buy an EV. We want to find other transportation solutions that are both more equitable, better for the whole community, and take advantage of all these technologies that are being deployed, and figuring out how we can work with our partners like RIPTA in creating a cleaner and more accessible and equitable public transportation system in Rhode Island. So there's a lot of wonderful opportunity ahead of us, but our intention is to make sure that as we think about how we shape each program, that we're thinking about how all of our customers will engage in those programs and benefit from them.
Also, since this is a Rhode Island call, there's another vehicle electrification opportunity that we don't talk a lot about, but you can electrify a lot of operations at ports. And I know that DEM is doing a lot of work with the Providence Regional Environmental Justice Committee to discuss pollution around the port. And so while it's maybe a smaller amount of the overall vehicle fleet in the area, there are some very significant geographical impacts from port operations, and you can electrify engines on even large cargo ships. Out in Washington State, they're doing hybrid ferries to help reduce emissions from the marine sector. You can also electrify the dock operations that will help stop ships from running their engines, idling their engines for other purposes, and also moving cargo in and out, and then the drayage trucks that operate through the communities. So those are all also electrification opportunities that would help.
Yeah, and the port is a huge area of concern for us. Thanks, Hank, about bringing that up. And There will be some exciting news coming out of DEM soon about a grant that we will be awarded to target emissions from those vehicles servicing and working at the Port of Providence. I think there's opportunity for that program to grow in the future and to include electrified versions of vehicles that do services at the port.
Great. I am excited to see that announcement. With just a couple minutes left, to be respectful of everyone's time, I'd love to, as a last question, just ask folks what additional opportunities there might be for engagement in the near future on these issues that, I'll certainly be looking out for, but, the more public engagement, the better on a lot of this stuff. So if we could go around and share an opportunity that's coming up that folks can take advantage of, that would be great.
I'll start. So specifically related to the medium and heavy duty ZEV MOU, so all of our states will be working to develop an action plan. And I think for this work, it's critical that we have not just government at the table, but auto manufacturers, businesses, local communities, being able to provide their input. So right now, we haven't done any formal specific outreach in Rhode Island, but you could contact me. We're looking to develop a plan, but we're looking for input about your concerns, what things you're excited about, data or studies that you may have, and strategies that we should be considering as we're developing the action plan. So please be in touch. That's like an immediate request, and there will be another opportunity. This will kind of be informal, but another formal opportunity at the start of 2021 to provide stakeholder input on a draft action plan.
If it's all right, I'd like to talk about an opportunity to engage with something that is tangentially related. So as we transition to an electric transportation sector, that greenhouse gas emissions reduction relies on us making sure that we green our grid at the same time. In January, the governor released an executive order tasking us with figuring out how to get to 100% renewable electricity by 2030. We have been working hard on that analysis, and we've had 2 public workshops already. The most recent public workshop was held just on Tuesday, and we are in the process of posting not only the slides, but an actual recording of that webinar. We're still working on some tech issues, but it should be up soon, I promise. And so one opportunity to engage is to take a look at that and email us with any public comments, questions, concerns, ideas, anything. We accept public comment all the time through our general office email address, energy.resources@energy.ri.gov. But we would certainly appreciate comments over the next 2 weeks, specifically pertaining to the analysis itself. And so please do take a look at it. It's on our website, energy.ri.gov/100%. And then email us if you have any questions. Thanks.
Thanks, Carrie. I'm going to put Hank on the spot to answer next.
I saw Julia. I thought she might have been trying to unmute. Yeah, so I think for me, the broadest public engagement opportunity for folks on the line is the Transportation and Climate Initiative. So we've touched on it a couple of times throughout the panel today. For anyone on the line that is unfamiliar with it and wants to know more, there is a website, transportationandclimate.org. But the way it would function, it's a multi-state, regional, bipartisan, and multi-sector plan, or has support from multiple sectors of the economy. And it would essentially apply a price on carbon from the transportation fuels at the upstream level, so the fuel companies that enter into the market. And it would take, and it's a small fee, and it would take the proceeds and invest in clean transportation strategies. like we've been discussing today: vehicle electrification, active mobility, public transportation, the whole gamut. And so it's a really great opportunity to move together as a region, and it's a great advocacy opportunity for those who are interested. So.
So Mal, I'm last here, and I think partly because I am struggling to come up with anything that is like up and coming specific for Rhode Island. I wish I had. Maybe it's partly because of COVID times, but I don't have any great offering to engage our audience in at the moment. But I will say that if you're interested in learning more about National Grid's electric vehicle offerings and looking at our infrastructure programs, please feel free to contact me. And the other thing is that we have a fleet advisory program. And so if anyone on the call, either works for a company that has their own fleet or knows of someone that, has fleet vehicles that they might be interested in learning about how to convert, that's an opportunity that's available to Rhode Island companies. So I want to make sure that people are aware of that one. We didn't talk much about that today. So I don't know if Carrie, did you have something else you wanted to add to it, or? Okay. But yeah, no, thanks for this opportunity. It's a great conversation.
Yeah, and I thought that was a great call to action. I think there's, lots of things that anyone can be doing regardless of their role or where they work to help this transition move along. There's a lot of space and a lot of work to do. So thank you all for joining me and sharing your insights. This is really great. And I'm hoping we can, work together and eventually meet Rhode Island's ZEV goal. It's a big one and it's coming up, but I think, especially with Rhode Island being the smallest state, there's a lot of opportunity and room for mobility innovation. And I think electrification is a big part of that. So thank you all for joining me here today. And this webinar was recorded, so I'll be sure to share it so that we can, get the word out about what Rhode Island is doing. And have a good rest of your afternoon. Thank you all.
Thanks so much for coordinating.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.